I'll go ahead and show the screen here for our Stump the Chump session. We ended up getting about 15 or 16 questions sent in during the day and before the meeting. So we have a handful of topics. And I want to thank a few people because they've been replying and filling this out during the day. So everyone that's been just adding their 2 cents worth into it, this is perfect. Our first question comes from Jason Becker at Bradley Corp. And Jason, are you on the call? Yes.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. And Fred just unmuted before I could click the button. You guys use a lockbox with an auto post, and when it turns around in post, it's not catching any of the discounts if the client's doing like a net 1% 10-day type early short pay. So it's leaving those out on the invoice for you to have to go back in and fix later. Is my understanding the question correctly?
Correct up to that point, but we aren't really going back now after we've allowed the auto post option to not auto post. We just allow it to stay open and create the end batch, so we have to manually post the auto post batch then. And what we end up having to do is we have to go into the customers and go under invoice selection, and we have to uncheck them and then recheck them, and then the system picks it up. We've asked this through levels of Epicore, and they said, yes, this is a known glitch. It's not on a future rollout. It might be on a roadmap with other changes, future releases, but really the discounted terms then really are not working with cash applications that we can find. I just was trying to find out if anybody does it differently, or if they don't have any issues, maybe what we're doing wrong.
Does anybody have any ideas on this?
We ended up rewriting the custom locksbox processing process using REST actually, because of similar issues we had. One of the issues we ran into is that if it can't find a customer or invoice to match the deposit to, it just kind of poofed it away, and that was not good. We needed to find a way to say, hey, just because you couldn't find an invoice and you couldn't find a customer to apply it to doesn't mean that that payment didn't happen. So we ended up rewriting it ourselves, unfortunately, using the REST interface. But that was really the only idea. And I know it's not a very easy thing for you to do. So.
Okay, you rewrote it with what?
We rewrote it using the REST interface that I was talking about a little while ago. So we basically get the file from the bank and process it ourselves using REST, and then give the and then we created a new UD screen in Epicore for them to process it through.
Okay.
Like, unfortunately, that's not a very trivial thing to do for most people. So it took us quite a bit to set it up. But we make sure we handle things like discounts and stuff like that, because we were running some issues with that, and as well as unknown or unmatched payments.
Okay.
You might be able to do a BPM though. I'm.
That's what I would think, is just put a BPM on the lockbox process. It might be rough to run the trace on it.
Well, the lockbox process runs through system agent, so you can't quite put a BPM on that guy, but you might be able to do like a data directive on the cash receipt application to basically refresh or do the equivalent of checking and unchecking the invoice for you. But that might be a little tricky. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Jason, you might talk to your IT guy, Tim Milatis, and suggest a data directive that just unchecks the box and checks the box automatically when as it's being processed.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. We're let me hit the next page here. Jason's got another question.
Yeah, my last one.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead? You're already unmuted, so I'll go ahead and let you present it.
Yeah, so basically what we run into an issue is when we're processing a payment and the customer, because we have the national, we use the national tiering, so we have parents and children, and what we find is that Epicore requires when the text file comes in from the bank, it picks up the first line item and uses that as the customer number on the header screen of the cash receipt entry. And that's no problem when it's trying to apply all of the invoices. We don't have a problem with that. It just becomes an issue when that customer has taken a deduction on that remittance and it's not related to that customer number. It forces it to put that debit note onto that customer, the wrong one. So we presented that to Epicore, and their suggestion is what we already do, and it's a workaround, is we have to physically figure out how much that deduction is, find an invoice that's on that check, and pull that difference off and create another check, manual entry into the end batch. So that the cash balances and allows us to start out with the customer number that we want that debit note to be on. And they said that is the workaround. They do have no resolution for that.
Have you submitted to this through the enhancement request portal that Tim was showing us earlier? Because this, I would say, is
like
it's exactly, this is working as designed, but it's not a good design. You want it fixed. This, I would say, should definitely be something that's put up into that Epicore portal. Would you agree, Tim?
Yeah, I would say putting this in an Epicore ideas would probably be a good thing. You put it in there.
Yep.
See if people will vote for it.
Yep, I have. Yep,
Okay.
I have done that. Yep. So I guess that's just how it's designed, and so okay. All right, that's my question. So thank you.
Hey, sorry
Appreciate
about
the
that,
invite.
Yep.
No problem.
Our next one came in from John Myers over at Kennel. They have a group of batteries that they need to be periodically recharged. Production wants to track the labor involved with setting up the batteries on chargers. 15 minutes each or 50 at a time. Charging takes about 4 hours to set it up, and scheduling the resources. How can they accommodate the 4 hours required for charging without recording as labor? And Tim submitted an answer to this before the session, and that is create an operation with setup time for the setup, but the actual production time does not need the labor, but it does need a no value add resource. The production time will schedule the duration, but will not accumulate costs. The MES user would need to report the setup is complete and the production is complete, but this could be the quantity only transaction. And John, are you out there? I see your hand is up. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm here.
Did that make sense to you, John?
So what we're talking about is two operations. One for the setup portion.
No, it's just one operation.
You're just going to use the setup and the production time fields on that one operation.
You can have one operation and it has a setup time and it has a production time. And if you look on this operation, there's actually a setup resource and a production resource. And you basically...
Okay,
so,
2 different resources.
Yeah, so you can say that the production resource is just, we used to do this for what we called heat table. The part had to be put onto the heat table, which took setup time of 1 hour. But then once it got on the heat table, it had to run for 7 days sitting on the table. There was no labor. And when they took it off the table, they had to go in and say, hey, I just took it off the table. But that way you could see that it was consuming duration, but not consuming cost. We didn't cost it. and we didn't have people having to clock in every day. It was there.
Okay, so I'm looking at an operation right now. So we currently just use resource groups. So we would need to establish another
Just a resource group just for the charge time. Create a resource group that's a location resource group that's just a machine that is the charging station, and there's no labor.
Okay, and then once we did that, then the 4 hours of charging time would go on that resource group ID as setup time, or excuse me,
as runtime, production time. The setup time would be the person required to do the setup.
Right. Okay.
Who'd have to load the batteries into the chargers.
Right.
Right. Yeah. As it is I think it's like 15 minutes to set up 50 batteries, and then all 50 batteries are charged all at the same time.
Yep.
So
you could even put fixed hours on that. So you could say it's fixed hours fixed 4 hours of production time.
okay.
And so that way it doesn't matter whether it's 1 battery or 50 batteries, it's still going to take 4 hours. And
Right.
setup is always it's a fixed hours. So
Okay.
unless you use the magical additional setup time, which is another cool feature, but
Okay. I'm looking at the resource group right now. Where would the I'm seeing about burden rates and labor rates, but I'm not seeing anything about timing. Or would that be
Timing would be on the operation,
yeah, that's at the operation level.
okay?
not on the operation detail where you're selecting the resource.
So one of my simple explanations of the difference between an operation and a resource, the resource is the noun, the thing that you do it on, or
Right.
the person, place, or thing where the work is done. The operation is the verb, it's the action word, and the verb is what has the time on it. The noun is what has the cost per verb. So it's when you're defining an operation, you're saying this is what we're going to do, the verb, what the action you're going to take, and it takes the resource, the noun, to do that work. And so that's how, if you think about those as two different things, one is a machine or a person, and the other is the action you're going to take. The action gets the time, and the noun, the person, place, thing gets the cost.
Okay, and in this particular case, the time would actually get established in
the operation.
Inside.
Yeah,
and I'm looking at the operation maintenance right now, but I see.
Well, the operation maintenance is actually not, that's where you'd establish what you do, but the actual amount of time you do that in the engineering workbench or in the job.
Okay.
So you define it, and you go into the job, you say, I'm going to do this work with this resource group, and here's how much time it's going to take for this part.
Okay, and how much is set up versus how much is production time.
Correct.
Okay. Now we use quantity only for costing. So
and that would be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so the setup time would come in as labor, and you're saying with the production time set at, say, 4 hours is fixed, then that would not be costed at that point.
If you assign it to a resource group that has no cost, so if your battery charging station has no cost, it's not costed.
Okay. It would just be the resource group that has,
the production resource group is what it uses.
Okay.
Again, you would still have to tell it that you finished doing that work. Otherwise, it's going to see that as open, incomplete work until you do a quantity only and say, hey, I just finished this work.
Okay.
That
And-
would you would do at the end when you say, hey, I finished it. So
That's right. In the resource group, there are two different labor rates.
Yep.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So there would be just a labor rate on the setup and nothing on production.
Yep.
Okay. I think I get it.
Can I
All
add
right.
something to that?
So I was, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is Beth. And when I read your question, John, here's what I thought. If you have two operations, you have a setup and then you have a takedown or whatever, you could use a move time of 4 hours in between, which wouldn't add any cost at all. So you'd have two operations. You would clock in when you're setting up, and then the person who is taking down would clock in when they're taking down. And that way you get your scheduling time because you're using a 4-hour move time in between the two operations.
Okay. Yeah. And that would be, if I remember right, the move time would be established on the workbench as well. Yeah.
Correct. That's on the resource.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the nice thing about what you just said, I was thinking about having a second operation because I want to show that I completed the setup. So I want to complete that operation. Now I'm on another operation that's 4 hours, which then could be backflushed when I do the third operation, which is takedown. And I would set that second operation as a backflush operation and point it to an employee with a $0 rate too, so you don't pick up any dollars that way also.
Right. Okay. All right.
So you got a couple options to work with there, John.
Yeah.
Um,
The other thing is, you brought up something that there is no, they haven't said anything about the amount of time to tear those batteries down out of the chargers. Whether that would be included in the 15 minutes or how that would be worked. So that becomes another issue because what they're trying to do is they're trying to cost labor for doing this charging and get a better handle on what it's actually costing us to do for labor and stuff on those types of operations. And we haven't been doing that. So
yeah, and that's actually a challenge we have in Epicore because we don't have a setup and a teardown time. We just have setup. So you either have to have a second operation for teardown or include your teardown time in the setup. And it's just assumed that, yeah, it took you 10 minutes to set it up and 5 minutes to tear it down. You get credit for 15 when you say you did the setup.
Right.
It's kind of assumed that you're going to do the teardown later.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And the only way to truly do it, if you're going to track it down to the minute and have them do clock in and clock out, is to have two different operations. Yeah, that's overkill.
Fred Bose has also mentioned that about the move and queue time and utilizing that because that's kind of like with a paint operation and the time it takes the paint to dry. But if you do the move time, consider you wouldn't need to necessarily utilize the resource calendar because the batteries can charge overnight after the guys go home and then they come in the morning and tear it down and take them out.
Right.
So it's not like if they started at 4:59 and they leave at 5, they don't have to wait 4 hours and then tear it out at 9 o'clock or 10 in the morning. They can tear it out when they come in at 6.
And that's exactly what I suggest to do normally is when you create that, and I typically say it's a workbench or whatever it is. It's the charging station is the resource group. The charging station has a 24/7 calendar. So it doesn't matter when you do that. It just, as soon as they do it, they could do it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They finish their setup. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, they arrive and they can take it off. The scheduling system will just go and, well, hey, it was done.
Yeah.
So we did that same exact thing with our heat tables. It was a 24/7 resource. Once you put it on, 7 days later, it was available to come off. It didn't matter whether it was weekends or holidays. It just went through. It had to sit on the heat table for 7 days.
Okay. Then what you were saying about an employee with a 0 rate, that would be if we were doing 2 operations, correct? And the second one for
I didn't say an employee with a 0 rate. I said a resource. A resource can be a machine. So
right.
I made the comment if you're going to clock into that operation.
Oh, okay.
Or on backflash, you want a 0 rate on the employee.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Only if it was. Okay. Okay. So it would be it would be single in the first example, it would be single operation. They would log into it as a setup activity to set up the batteries, and then and then they would log into a production activity, and when they got done with the batteries and they were getting ready to do tear down, and that one would not have a labor rate on it, so it wouldn't charge that time. It wouldn't cost it.
Correct.
Okay. I think I got it straight. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Hey, the next one we got on here came in from Anders over at Engineering Services. Identifying performance bottlenecks. They have a lot of end user complaints that Epicore is slow. What's the best way to identify where the time is going with a client trace? What are good settings to make analysis good but thorough? Having a 5,000 line trace is very difficult to work with. Filtering out or purging records, keep it running faster. Let me go back one. In order so it takes a while. The performance diagnostic tool can tell you where it's taking its time when you're analyzing the method or the object call. It'll tell you what took the longest time so that you can kind of trace, look at that trace file and then go back and say, hey, what were the slow things? Was it I had to pull back 500 lines on the open order? So yeah, the order took a whole lot of time to pull back, or was it stalling getting the order header? So being able to run the performance diagnostic tool is also a good one for finding out ways to speed it up. Pete Chikes has put this out there. Have you installed the Microsoft patch that kind of hosed up Epicore around February 14th? There's a big discussion on the Epi users about the Microsoft patch that kind of brought Epicore to a screeching halt for some people between February and middle April. So that could also be a thing that you need to take a look at, Andres. I know a lot of people had Windows 10 auto updates turned on, Microsoft applied updates that brought Epicore to its knees. Any other suggestions for that one?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's really just a trial and error. The trace is your friend. You got to narrow it down. If you can narrow it down to a specific screen or a specific method, and then have the user just do that a few times and run traces, that'll help. But just we have the same problem, right? Users like Epicore is slow. Well, what's slow? Everything. That doesn't help, right? So find something specifically that you think is not slow, or sorry, that you think is slower than it should be, and focus on that. And hopefully, if you've solved that problem, it'll kind of trickle into other issues. But just like you said, looking at a 5,000 line trace, it's not going to help you. You got to find one individual point and narrow your focus.
Yeah, and don't turn on all tracing of all things. The other thing is turn on tracing and clear it just before you perform an action like save. That, if you found that whenever you save a sales order, it's taking a long time, then get to that point and then clear the trace log, press the save, and then go capture the trace log at that point and find out what's there. Because what you might find, and I've been in this situation, you might have a set of BPMs that are firing off, and your BPMs are data triggers, and they're getting triggered every time a sales order release is touched, and it's touching every sales order release 20 times per line item. I had this happen. And so you find out that when you save a 50 line item order, that your BPM is firing off 5,000 times. And it's things like that that we don't know. And it's, it might not be Epicore's fault. It might be your BPM that's causing it. And I'm not trying to blame your BPMs. We don't know that until we look at that trace, analyze the trace to find out
exactly what happened there. Yeah, we had a client that had 27 BPMs on order entry to make sure that it all got categorized and calculated correctly, and discounts were applied based on different product groups. So they found out just 27 BPMs firing one after the other is going to slow down order entry.
Along
The other
those
thing is
lines,
that
too,
if
if
you're not
there's a
familiar,
form
not used
customization, with the same thing with the method call, if you're calling that kind of same business logic or attach something in a customized form to that business logic, it could, if you don't have your kind of what I would call filters set properly to limit when it's like fires, it could fire over and over and over again too, slowing down performance. So if you do have form customizations, especially with any kind of C# script, definitely review it.
Scott Williamson has a suggestion here for you also. He found the workstation had a very old SSD in it, and it was time to replace the SSD. So it was actually occurring only on one workstation for him, and found out it was old hardware.
Wow.
One thing that actually I've just done this in the last month, working with a customer we're talking tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of parts. And it was taking a long time to run PO suggestions. There's a table called part detail, part DTL, which is your time phase. And we said, I only want to run PO suggestions on parts that are active on time phase. And it changed the time from hours to minutes for PO suggestions. And you probably could do the same thing with MRP.
Yeah, and I want to say there's a conversion workbench program to purge the orphan part detail records for doing maintenance and cleanup. So
I'll have to check that one out. Okay.
There's a conversion program for fixing that because it was hosing up an MRP run for a client. Matt Hermanson says here they've applied updates and patches and unfortunately are still seeing slowness across the board. Sometimes it takes more than a minute just to pull one order up in data entry.
Do you have maintenance on your databases? Are you on the cloud or are you on-prem?
Matt, are you out there?
If you're on-prem, a lot of customers that are on-prem forget that if you're not on the cloud, you gotta have a DBA type person in your system who is responsible for maintenance, right? That's an issue that we run into again and again and again and again. Updating your indexes, I would say at least once a week. Refreshing your SQL statistics on your tables at least once a week. If you're not doing that, you're going to be hurting. And people forget that that's important. SQL is very smart, but it is not smart enough when you have high volume transactions and high volume tables like part tran, part detail, things like that. It is not smart enough to keep those indexes in tip-top shape. And in particular, the database statistics are incredibly important. I have had queries running that take 5 minutes to run, and I've simply updated the statistics on the one table, and that query has gone from 5 minutes to 30 seconds, just because you updated the statistics on the table. So if you are on-prem, please do your due diligence, rebuild or reorganize your indexes at least once a week, rebuild your database statistics at least once a week.
And this can be put into your maintenance plan.
Yep.
So this can be automated, and in that free sources, the Brent Ozark guy goes through how to do this and set this up.
And I know, a bunch of people who just do not do anything with the database, and it requires maintenance. If you don't have a DBA person, you know, you can get a consultant to help you or whatever, but you do need somebody to be looking at your database at least on a weekly basis, depending on your volume.
Now, Matt, I went ahead and unmuted you. I see that you're adding a couple additional questions in here into the thread for what you've been experiencing. So if you want to unmute yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
You got it.
Okay. So I work with Andres, so we've kind of been battling this ongoing thing for quite some time. Basically, we reached out to all the department heads over the course of the last week just to see if we can ask them basically if they're experiencing any Epicore slowness. And the response we got was pretty staggering, that in many cases, you know, just to update a single line, people are waiting, you know, 30 seconds before Epicore will respond. In a lot of cases, they are running into Epicore not responding, just pulling up a customer and things like that. And we're trying to really narrow down where this issue might be becoming, because we did a hardware overhaul probably 2 years ago. We went basically put everything on SSD, all the servers. We have 3 different app servers. You know, we've done pretty much everything that was recommended, but for some reason, we're still seeing a lot of Epicore slowness across the board. Shipping, for instance, you know, from the time we pull in a pack until, you know, it gets shipped is a minute or more. Even just, you know, if we do from the time we freight it, the time that it gets freighted and shipped, just a checkbox checked, it's sometimes 30 seconds to a minute. So we're really seeing a lot of issues with the slowness.
So if you pick one of those transactions and you run a trace on it, where's your time allocation at? Is it server processing? Is it transit time? Where in the trace it tells you the different times, right? What was it the part that took longest? And it's usually 3 or 4 options in there. There's server processing or network time or processing time. I would like, just out of curiosity, to see where is your time spent, because it
Sure.
could be something as simple as a network issue. You mentioned you had 3 app servers, which kind of raised a flag with me. That means that you're probably using some sort of load balancer. Is it a hardware load balancer or a software load balancer? What is the load balancer? How is it set up?
Yeah.
It's a software load balancer. How is it set up? Is it round robin? Is it caching? So that's something we ran into here. We're running a load balancer with 3 app servers too, and we had it set up to where it basically tied. It was round robin. So every request hit a different app server. The problem is that if you made a request and then you made another request and you made another request, every single one of those requests had to be teared down and built up through the TCP stack for the different app servers it was hitting. So we saw a pretty decent performance gain by doing client stapling. So basically, when you spin up the app server, or not the app server, when you spin up the client, rather, it picks a app server in the load balancer, but you stay with that as long as your session is active. So you don't switch between app servers during a single session. That helped significantly. But I'd be curious to see what your actual breakdown is. And if you want to throw it up in Epi users or something, I'd love to look at it. But just what your breakdown is of a single call that you consider slow, what the breakdown is between network transit and processing time and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
And I also look at.
You could also look at doing it on your test server. Is it slow on your test server as well? Because then you're eliminating all your extra users.
Yep.
So if it's something tied with a BPM or customization, if it's still slow on your test system, then you could look at, okay, turn off all your BPMs, turn off everything. Is it still slow? If it's slow with base Epicore, then you're probably looking at something in your hardware setup. Maybe you don't have all the performance flags turned on properly, because if you're using virtual machines, you have to make sure those are set up right, make sure your disks are formatted right, make sure that the host machine doesn't have the BIOS setting to say conserve power, because then it's just going to try and run CPUs at slower speeds, so it'll conserve power. So I would say if you've got the time and the manpower, look at doing that as well, and that can help you eliminate a lot of things without affecting production.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And Dave Miller threw out an idea. They found that they had a second NIC on their VM that they had to disable. Remove the second NIC on the VM. It was causing the slowdown.
Okay. That's something
And
we
then
can look into.
the other thing is that Microsoft bug that they've introduced, it's still not totally fixed. And there's still, on the Epi user site, there's still discussion and possible solutions. And it's not a Epicore bug. It's affecting anybody with infragistics that uses grids. So it's kind of, it's hitting a lot of the Microsoft world, and Microsoft has not come out with a formal patch for it yet. So
okay, yeah, I know that's definitely affected us. We've seen the performance definitely degrade with that update. You know, we've added the additional patches right now. You know, we're testing the latest release of updates that supposedly, or that Microsoft release that's supposed to resolve the issue, but we haven't done enough thorough testing on it to know if it makes
a difference. There's a very weird solution that somebody's posted. I have not tested it, and I don't know that Epicore's tested it. Is you create this weird dashboard that has a graphic that has a certain type of graph on it, and you run that, and the problem goes away. And people are, there's all people saying, it's weird, but it solves the problem. And yeah, it's an extra step, but it solves the problem. So anyway, just, you might go look on the Epi user forum and see that, search for the discussions that have the really high hits, because there's, I think one of them has 170 comments on it. But somebody has posted this, and multiple people have said it works for them. So.
Okay, great.
You could also, Matt, what we're doing is taking off the theming in Epicore, and that has been speeding up some of our users. Because I have a question, not exactly related to this, but very similar. We are experiencing the exact same thing that you're describing.
And you say that again, Christine. What did you disable?
There's a theming. There's theming in Epicore.
Theming, okay.
Yeah. If you disable that, that has, I think that's actually on the Epi users as a potential solution. We have seen that has helped many of our users when we did that.
Okay, we'll look at that as well. All right, well, I appreciate all your guys' suggestions.
Yep, as a final one, you can also roll back before the February update and see if that works on one workstation.
Sure, okay.
Hey, Calvin, I think one of the updates they put through prevented you from being able to roll that back to before that point. So if they already went to that level, it could block them from going back further.
Awesome. And Tracy had a question about trying to track the expensive query. Can you tell what it is? When you're running the performance diagnostic tool, you're able to see exactly which ones are running and how long they're taking each one to run.
Another thing that you may not know is that if you run the trace and there's 5,000 lines on it, it's not really easy to look at. But if you put the trace into the PDT actually has a tool built in that lets you analyze that trace in a little bit more friendly way.
Yep.
Okay, that's good to know.
It lets you do filters and stuff like that.
There is a video on the performance diagnostic tool. Nathan did a real in-depth procedure demo for the user group on how the PDT works, and I believe that video is up on the YouTube channel also. So if you want help on how to use the PDT or how to analyze that data, I think that was up in Nathan's presentation from Epicore. Another one, Andres also has a question here about stopping Epicore pop-ups. How can we identify where they're coming from and then intercept and suppress them? Many of them are just extra clicks that we want to eliminate in the shipping process. Typically, a trace doesn't show anything, unfortunately. He's tried decompiling, but it's far in the weeds for his intermediate level of programming skills.
So I have, I can't give you a good solution that works for all instances, but I do know that in some cases, if you can find out which process is actually doing the pop-up, you can prohibit it with a BPM. We did this with in sales orders. If you notice, when you put in a sales order and you put a new line on it, you change the part number, it pops up and says, warning, this customer's on credit hold. And it does that every single time on every single line item. You have a 50 line item order, it's a pain in the neck. We modified it so that we put a BPM that just prohibited the call to go check
The credit.
for credit.
Yep.
And so it doesn't check, it doesn't call, it never throws the error.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no formula for everything.
I know.
a lot of times, if you look at the trace and you see that the method has a variable called out message, out MSG, that usually will mean that message you're seeing on the screen is being populated by that out message. So a BPM that clears that out message will usually remove the pop-up. But again, that's only if you can see it in the tracing. In your example here with the packing slip, I actually went digging at the code, and it's hard-coded into the actual Epicore screen logic in the C# side. So you're kind of up a creek without a paddle on that one, unless you want to do something like completely replace that call with with a customization.
And Jose, your solution is exactly how we did it with the credit. We didn't stop the call for the credit. What we did was after the call for credit, we looked at it, and we actually set a variable that said, hey, this message has already been displayed for this customer.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a check to find out if the BPM variable had that message in it already, and if it did, then we just cleared the credit message so it didn't display it again. So we kind of did that little trick of clearing the credit message so that it didn't get displayed. But that's if you can find that, great. If you can't, then it's hard to stop.
Yeah, it's hard to stop that without a heavy customization.
The heavy customization. I mean, you could do some heavy customizing, like where you intercept the event and remove the event, but I mean that's level 6 type of thing. So unfortunately, some of them are easier than others.
Sorry about that, Andrew. Sorry about that, Matt.
In Kinetic 21, you should be able to just go modify the rule, and then you should be okay. So there's something to look at in the future.
Awesome. Okay, our 6th question came in from Christopher at TechEtch. Is there a way to have Epicore calculate out subcontract costs accurately when the subcontract unit measure is different than the inventory unit measure on the manufactured part? And I'm going to say that, quoting here. And the quoting method does have cost, but requires them to manually select the price list and manipulate the quantity per to have the cost for the correct quantity. There is no automated way to doing this other than putting a BPM in place for a method directive that turns around and selects that for you. That event is being called in the quote. It's just there is no way to handle that, and you'll also find you'll have an issue if you use salvage. I want to say the salvage unit of measure didn't stay in sync with the material unit of measure if they were different.
Yeah, and this is a problem if there's lot charges or weird things like that. So you make 100 pieces, and well, if you're making 100 pieces and it's 25 piece per, they have to have 25 smaller groups. You can have a real problem in saying, oh, for every 25, it costs us $5 to get it annealed or something. It just doesn't. We don't have a great solution for that, except for, and I've seen this done with product configurator. The product configurator can go out there and massage the operations and change
Correct.
That for us. So
that's what you would have to do with the directive.
Yeah. So it can be done dynamically with a product configurator. In fact, one thing we did with Bradley was they had a situation where if the order size was greater than some magic number, it literally changed a part to be outside processing rather than inside processing. So it changed the way the price, it did everything change. So you can have lots of magic with configurator, but in base code, this is a challenge. The system typically wants to do it as, you know, 1 per 1. If you have a quantity of 100, it wants a quantity of 100 on subcontract. Enhancement request, Epicore ideas.
That would be a good one to put up because this has been out there for a long time. Next one came in from Tracy at Bruno. We also have a custom box on a quote and order. If the contact on the customer has their box checked, we want to collect the contact email address to send a document to them via APR. What's the best way to collect those emails and a list to get it into APR? And Bruce had a indirect suggestion from Dave Olander. He says use role codes. You can select your customer list and filter by role code equals buyer, for example. I'm trying to find Tracy here in the list so I can get her unmuted. Okay,
I would think that
if you want to unmute yourself, you can hop in.
I would think the best way is to do this is probably, since it's a custom box, is to use a BPM to take that and move it to wherever you need to do it.
Yep, and just
So
use the
Yeah, the issue that we were having, so if we had a checkbox on the contact saying they want to receive every quote or they want to receive every order, if we just brought in one email address, that's easy. But to make them into a list is where we were having an issue. But are you guys saying that it would be easier to use a role code and then call that somehow from the quote or order?
That was completely misunderstanding your question there. So what you're looking for is you have multiple contacts that want to be included on that automatic document print. So
Yes.
You want the order acknowledgement to go to 5 people for this customer, but then for this customer it only goes to 2 and this one only gets 1.
Yes, that's
the only way I
correct.
would think of doing that is with a custom code. When Tim was doing the sample, and I think the email example that Beth was showing for POs, same thing, you can specify then multiple email contacts in code, but I don't think you can do it via APR. You'd have to set up the rule that if there's more, like if the query returned is more than 1, then run this method multiple times and do recursion in your method directive for your automatic print routing.
So we actually did this exact same thing for one of our for our invoicing. We have a customer, several customers who a bunch of people or contacts want to get invoices. So what we did is we do have a checkbox on the contact that says include. I think that's actually built inside checkbox on the contact that says billing contact or something like that. And what we did is we put a BPM, a data directive on the contact table, that when that checkbox is true, the data directive basically appends a semicolon separated list of emails to a custom field in the customer header. And then it's pretty simple to send it, set the to be that custom field. So basically in your contact a BPM, you say if the checkbox is true, append this email address to the customer.mycustomemail_c. And basically every time you check the checkbox, it continues appending to that one field. And so at the end, you have one big field with a bunch of semicolon separated email addresses. So you just address the email to that one field.
Yep. The other one that I've seen people do is a distribution list.
That works.
Like an email distribution list?
You got it. And
That
then
becomes
send
more
an email to that.
Yeah, that becomes more complicated when your distribution list is a bunch of customer addresses, but I've seen that done too. So depends on how big of a company you are and how many different customers and distribution lists you would have.
Yep. But that would be another option. If you're talking only a handful of ones to do this, because then you have to manually manage those distribution lists too.
Oh, Yeah, that's a lot of distribution lists.
Okay.
I kind of like the idea of putting it on the customer record that when we check it to append the email address into that customer field.
And just separate them with a semicolon, because that's all that email's going to utilize to separate them back out.
Yep. It's a fairly trivial BPM.
Yep.
I'll see if I can throw an example on Epi users later on if I have some time.
That would be awesome. Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next one here. Hey, is anyone auto-populating the buyer on the part? I mentioned this one to you earlier, Tracy. I'm going to put this in the Stump the Chump section. And
Yeah, I think we already answered that one, right?
I wanted to make sure that that handled your question.
Yep.
Awesome.
I have notes on that to take back to my other people. Thank you.
Awesome, perfect. Next one in from Carrie. I think this was an email that came in to you, Fred. Is there a way to default the search functionality so that the show all results box is always checked? And Tim Shoemaker turned around and said, make your own quick search and make it the default. This way, your quick search would return all the results, and that becomes the default for the users. They don't use the Epicore base search. So is Carrie on the meeting?
I don't think she is.
And this corresponds to the very next question. Also, if you look at the next question,
But there's one more thing you can do, which I don't particularly recommend. It seems like a bad idea, but you can add the default search per page size to your configuration, and you can set that to 1 million, and then it will always return everything.
That's just not nice.
I maxed mine out at about 1,000, just because if I had 20,000 orders and I hit search button, I didn't want to be waiting for 20,000 orders to populate.
Yep. Yeah, so it's a bad idea in general to default that checkbox, but if you wanted to, there is that big hammer out there in your config that you can totally use.
Or you can at least increase it to increase the amount above the 100 results that it shows.
And then Carrie also had the other question here that you had answered, Tim.
Yeah, so basically my answer to anytime somebody says they don't like how something searches, or they wanted extra fields, or they want it sorted differently, or they want more records, is, hey, it's so easy to create a quick search. Create a quick search. It's just a BAQ, and then you go in, you create the quick search, and you can then click the use all occurrences, and now all of a sudden it's the default quick search for everybody. And they all have this new version that does it the way your company wants to use the quick search.
Exactly.
And, your solution is 5 minutes away. It's really quick, and you can go beyond. I mean, the first time I actually did quick searches was a customer that was under lot control, and they wanted their part numbers to be able to, they wanted to search for part numbers by lot number. Like, okay, no problem. You go in there and we have a part number field, and a description field, and a lot number field, and you put in the lot number and it shows you all the part numbers that fell in the lot, that lot. And it's really simple, and they were able to do it. So.
And it takes all of about 5 minutes to roll out. It's definitely very simple.
Yep. And you can have multiple of them too. So you can have multiple quick searches, and they can show up when you right click in the field too. So there's so many different ways of doing quick searches. Are like a super powerful thing. And if you're not using them, you should learn them, because you all of a sudden find out that you want to have 100 different quick searches out there. So maybe not that many, but
awesome. Free. So anybody with that question, and Joel also said you can use a name search as well.
Yes.
Dawn is asking where she can learn about quick searches. Go into the application help, and it's right in there, right inside the application.
So one of the other things I will say is that this would make a really good topic for your next user group meeting, because you could show how to create a quick search on the fly really quick.
I want to say we did that already. I think this one's already been done, but yeah, we can definitely throw that out there. Okay, next one was Jay over at Latania Sports. They ship a lot of odd-sized freight athletic equipment, therefore they make use of freight prepay and add, whereby they add the LTL freight charges to the customer's invoice. After trying to work this with Epicore, they found out that the quick ship in Epicore, the prepay and add function, is rather inadequate. I know you guys use that, Christine. I'm not too familiar. The desire is to take the freighted information from the bill of lading and send an API call to the main carrier, receive the freight quote, and bring it back into Epicore for inclusion onto the invoice. That would definitely be doable, and just put it in the freight costs on the packing slip that was linked to the bill of lading, and then that would flow automatically down into invoicing when they do the get shipments function. Are you guys doing a lot of LTL over there, Christine? Are you on?
Yeah, I'm here. We do, but ours is still manually, actually. So I don't know how to best answer the question right now.
I do have a client that's having an issue trying to tie the AP invoice back to the corresponding freight charge.
We haven't had an issue, well, on the UPS FedEx side, we have never had an issue with anything coming from the shipping, from manifest into Epicore. So but again, I haven't tried it in the quick ship with an LTL carrier, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'll have to go into our test. I can try it in our test system. I just haven't had a chance to do that.
Brad Bose is mentioning that Manifest has a freight quoting option, but I don't think this is the quoting. It's getting the freight charges back for the LTL back onto the invoice after the shipment.
I mean, you could do this via customization, if you in customer shipment entry, you could make a call to the API and retrieve the charge and then create a miscellaneous shipment charge at ship time. But that's really the only thing I can think of.
I think there's a follow-up that says, the question is, what's the best way to do this? The IT staff says the API's calls are difficult.
Well.
And if you're...
Oh, no,
get better
no,
IT
I don't
staff.
think that.
I'm just kidding.
I would disagree on that one.
As you've seen, the REST API calls are pretty easy to do from the Epicore side. So then you just have to integrate your carrier, don't you?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, it's based on the carrier. I mean, some carriers I'm sure are going to be more difficult than others, but
Integrating UPS, FedEx, these are fairly simple. Introducing mom and pop trucking, they're probably not going to have a fully fleshed out API.
But if they're using a standard LTL with an API, then it's just a matter of writing the code. And if your internal IT can't do it, then maybe you can outsource that. But we've done this before with other specific charges that we wanted to include in an order, and we did it at ship time. So we did it when we put in the tracking number in the shipment. It goes out and pulls the information from the carrier and creates a miscellaneous shipment charge directly on the customer shipment entry. That would be my suggestion. If you're using one or two specific carriers, if you get a myriad of carriers you're using, then there really isn't an easy way to automate it unless you have some kind of middleware like Quick Ship, but they wouldn't support it.
She says she want to do it when the says they want to do it from the bill of lading. I'm assuming they're meaning from the customer shipment entry.
No, they're trying to do it from the bill of lading, go out to the carrier site and pull back the charges or the estimate for it.
So the bill of lading is created prior to the shipment being created in Epicore before it's freighted? Or
no,
not?
The packing slip would be created, but then you make the bill of lading and link the packing slips to it.
So Jay's asking, start with a method directive BPM or screen customization?
I guess it depends on where you're going to put it. If you're going on the bill of lading, I would say maybe a BPM would be at that point, since you already would have the shipment done. If you're in the customer shipment entry screen and you're going to do something like plug in the tracking number to get the information, then you could do it as a screen customization. But one of the best things you can do here, depending on your version of Epicore, is make yourself an Epicore function that will take something like the tracking number or some unique identifier and return the information you want. Then you can call that Epicore function from a customization or a BPM or a UBAC or a dashboard pretty seamlessly.
Yeah, but it would have to be after the bill of lading is created, the packing slips have been linked, we have the total weight, the classes, and the rate codes on the bill of lading. Then they would go out to the carrier site, put the information in there with the API, and then pull the freight back. But you'd have to update the freight to a miscellaneous charge on one of the packing slips linked to the bill of lading. You wouldn't want to do it to all of them because it's going to multiple charge the customer the freight. You'd only want to put it to the first link packing slip. But that would be a method directive off of the bill of lading after it's been created, because you want to make sure that all the linkages have been done and the rates have been updated and the codes have been set on the bill of lading lines. Hopefully that answered the question for Jay here. Yep, got an okay. The next one came in from Ethan over at Bruno. Absolute newbie question here. Say you have a Salesforce field that has commas in it. How would you effectively split that field into multiple values based on a comma placement? If there is no native split functionality, how would you stuff these values into an array and iterate over them? And Fred threw some sample code over. So you want to kind of review that, Fred?
I thought you were going to include it in your slide. I don't have a way to share it here.
Nope,
there you go.
I'll grab it and throw it in there.
Oh, there you go. That would be easier.
Control Z a few times. Copy.
My first question was, where are we doing this splitting? Is this in C# or is this in a BAQ or is this in a dashboard, or where are we trying to do this split?
This would be a split functionality, but this isn't going to be on a screen. This is going to have to be in code, Ethan.
Ethan, you're unmuted if you want to pipe up here.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be in the custom code area of BPM.
Then you could do something like the code that I've got there, and if you needed to iterate, you could do a for each over that array if you wanted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've only, a few months ago, I didn't even know what Epicore was, so I'm just getting my toes wet with this. Is this strictly adhering to C# standards, or is it C#-ish?
That's C#.
It is for C#.
Pure
Okay,
C#.
Awesome.
C# snippets of code. So you don't have to write a C# program. You're just writing lines of code using C# syntax.
Okay, perfect. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Awesome. And I'll put this in the handout, so when we send out the minutes, this will be attached there. If you didn't get it off the screen, it'll also be up in the video. Awesome. Next one came in. I think I just skipped over John. I did. John at Siemens Drew, we have trouble with adding miscellaneous items to a sales order, regular things like tariffs, freight. They use miscellaneous line, but for random items without a specific miscellaneous category, they're struggling because they're not in inventory to ship as a regular line item. Tim threw an answer out here. 3 options. 1, make more miscellaneous items so that you can add them and handle them. Number 2, make some non-quantity bearing part numbers for these items so they can be shipped without anything in stock. And number 3 was parts on the fly. You can also add a part on the fly to a sales order that doesn't exist in the system.
The challenge with part on the fly is that when you do a part on the fly, it's also going to expect you to either make it or buy it, because it assumes you have to have it. You don't have to make or buy it. You can still ship it without making or buying it, and it'll complain and stuff, but you can do that. But that's why I said, well, go ahead and make. We used to make non-quantity bearing parts all the time for those items that were regularly charged for, like an engineering charge that we wanted to say that we're going to charge 3 times or something like that. We would do that. But
the other one that someone had suggested is go ahead and put your tariffs in as taxes.
I don't think I was having a problem with the tariff and the freight. Tariffs and freight are being done with miscellaneous lines. That it was the other random items that, and I don't know what the definition of random items is. So that's.
John, are you out there?
I don't see him in the list.
We had tooling charges that we would do, and there was a tooling charge or a special test charge, and
we
there
have
were
tooling
things that were.
Yeah, we have the tooling and test charges in our miscellaneous list, but we'll have a customer say, "Oh, just bill us $50 for the special handling on this." And the problem is we've got a non-quantity bearing part called miscellaneous that we use for that. But then when the invoice gets to their payables, they say, "What in the heck is this for?" So we'd like to be able to write in the part and description, what it is. So,
did you know you can change the description on the sales order after you use that part number? Go into the description and tell it what it is.
Oh, okay.
Reflect that description.
I was going to suggest the same thing on order miscellaneous charges. So you can just create a miscellaneous charge called other, and you can change the description of that in the order itself to whatever you want.
Type in the description what it is.
So you can just have a generic miscellaneous charge, type in whatever description you want, and it'll keep it. So.
Now that miscellaneous charge is always going to book off to the same GL account.
Right.
As you're piggybacking on one charge, it's only tied to one GL control. But if you need multiple ones that go off to different bookkeeping, then you'd probably have set up multiple miscellaneous charge codes.
Okay, well, the changing the description is actually a good idea. I like that. I'll run that by the powers that be.
And you can do that on the part description or the miscellaneous charge codes description.
Right.
And the nice thing about the miscellaneous charge, though, is you don't have to remember to ship it, because when you ship the product, you can say to charge this charge at when you do with every shipment or with the first or the last shipment. So you don't have to remember to do it.
Sounds like a good idea.
And there's no inventory to adjust out or fix after you send an item that doesn't really exist.
Yep.
Awesome. Next one came in from Christine from Ag Leader. They're experiencing database deadlocks, specifically on the part detail table. Hey, this is another time this has come up. Causes issues for several uses when it happens. Have done several troubleshooting steps like SQL trace logs, look in the server logs, review BPMs, haven't been able to find out what's causing the deadlock. Looking to hear what other suggestions anyone are having for troubleshooting this issue.
I should say I wrote down some of the things. I wrote down some of the things Jose said. Awesome. We have already done we have re-indexed, and we looked at the PDT tool. We bought a new, not that this has anything to do with it, we did add a new app server as well to try to add some speed there for users. But we see these not every day, not every week, but sometimes quite often.
Is that during
MRP? We're busy.
During MRP or just regular users?
No, regular users. I get complaints especially from the production supervisors and job entry. That's where they see them the most. When we look at the SQL trace, or we look at we see deadlocks against sales order entry. A sales order sales users. We've seen them against receipt entry. We see them again, all kinds of different ones. And I'm struggling with trying to narrow down where do I go from here to really find out what's going on. Why am I now, after all these years, seeing so much more deadlocks? And I should specify, we are probably the busiest we've been in years too. I don't know that would be a difference, but this last 4, 5, 6 months, we've seen more deadlocks than I can recall.
Also check that conversion tool to run cleaning out the orphan part deedle records in the conversion workbench.
Okay.
Are you guys virtual? You guys are virtualized, I'm assuming. Are you guys on-prem virtualized?
We are on-prem. The database is not virtualized. We do have a couple of virtual app servers, but we do have physical app. We have a physical app server and a physical SQL server.
Okay, no, yeah, because I've seen some issues where if you take a VM snapshot during a transaction, it can cause a deadlock. But if you're bare metal, then
yeah,
not it.
Nope. Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to just chew on it and come
there's
up
a needle
with
in the
some
haystack
ideas
there.
to look at, that'd be great.
Okay, we've got a couple questions here that were thrown in. Caleb had a question. Is it possible to reference a third-party DLL in an Epicore function? In a BPM, they can reference external libraries, and that seems to be missing from Epicore functions.
Yes, there is a way to do that. So what you need to do is you create a folder in your Epicore server IIS website. You create a folder there. Put the external DLL in that folder. Then go to admin console and right click and go to configurations. In the server configurations, there is a field in there that says custom DLL's location. Point that to the custom folder that you just created. Then when you go into the functions, you can click add assembly and the assembly will list there. And I can kind of demonstrate that if you want. I don't know if I still have, but hopefully that made sense. I can actually just show you, because of course we're using that pretty heavily. If you throw the presenter at me, Calvin, I can show her real quick what I mean by that.
Hold on 1 second, because I just typed word for word what you sent, and I'm sending that over.
I tried to take the notes for Caleb. I don't know if
Caleb has left the meeting, so I can't click send to the message for him.
If you want to still show me, Jose, I can show Caleb what you just said, and I took a picture. I took some notes as well, but.
Okay, yeah, throw me the presenter real quick, and I'll show you. Hopefully the right.
You got it.
Oh, he's in the meeting. He's just on a phone. He says.
Okay, so you see here in application server configuration in admin console. Okay, so you can right click on your server, go to application server configuration, right? This custom directory little guy here, whatever DLL you throw in there will be available for you to use inside of your functions and anywhere in Epicore really, but functions, BPMs, etc. So all I do is we threw a folder here called CSG because we have a whole bunch of custom solutions. You see, like these are all custom DLLs, right? And we want these to be available to us in functions, BPMs, anywhere. There's, Bank of America and a bunch of other stuff, including like JSON web tokens, right? These are all custom external third-party things. We throw them in there. You go to your configuration, you add it to the custom directory, and you hit deploy. That will basically include that path in your assemblies. So when you go to the functions and you go to add assembly, any DLL in here will show up. One caveat, if you put a DLL in here that has the same name as the Epicore DLL, this DLL will take precedence. That can be a good thing. That can also be a really bad thing.
Perfect.
There you go. Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Go ahead and show my screen here. The next one is a question for me after Christine. You're good, Christine?
Yep, we're good. I got awesome back from Caleb, so we're good.
Okay. Now, I wasn't sleeping, Jose. When you did that, you were talking about verbs and using your RESTful services. And if I do a let me Google that for you, which I've never done for people, do you get different verbs in REST?
You're going to get a bunch of verbs back from the poor guy you sent that to. They're going to start with F.
Awesome. Okay, another question here from Ted Hollander. Regarding accounts payable situation, the invoice is entered with a May date to record the expense in May. Payment is made in April. At April 30th, there will be no entry on the AP aging report when there should be a credit balance payment in April for the invoice dated in May. How can we find the offending items to reconcile with the general ledger? Which one's correct? Frank, are you out here? I don't see him in the
see Frank either.
chat panel. I don't know if he dialed back in. I know he had a phone call and had to pop out this afternoon for a minute, but I didn't know if he was still out there.
He's not.
Okay. Next one we have from Caitlin Christensen. This is related to the topics from today, but I noticed that in Epicore and was wondering if there is a fix. We have a part set up for our main warehouse, but they move to our other warehouse. But in part maintenance, we cannot update the warehouse as there is already inventory transactions. Is there a workaround for this? Just take the inventory temporarily out, change your primary warehouse, and then put the inventory back in. As long as there's inventory in there, I don't think it allows you to change your primary warehouse. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Caitlin. I'm not sure if that answered your question for you. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, there you are. Caitlin, are you out there? Okay, and Tim needed to duck out. He will see everybody at Insights. He had a great time here today. Go ahead, and our last question that came in, Fred had found from email in Leanne Lukes, has an income statement railroad report each month in a separate column, but her year-to-date column isn't doing the math correctly and haven't been able to figure out how to fix it. Can she export to Excel and fix it? But she'd like it to be done in the system and add correctly every time. The columns should be able to do the math between them. That shouldn't be a problem. You'd have to take a look at what the equation is or how she's doing the comparison between the two columns. Are you out there, Leanne? I hope I'm pronouncing the name right.
I didn't see her, but let me double check. She is not.
Yeah, you sent me it as an email, so I wasn't sure who it was or who it came from. Okay. Any other questions out there? And Aaron Schaefer made a post earlier, and he's already left. It was about the Hallgren site for SQL statistics and maintenance, and I'll go ahead and update that to the put him in there as well. I forgot to put that one in there. I got Brendo's art, but I forgot about Hallgren. Any other questions for people? We are actually 2 minutes over, which I don't think we've ever been this close to on time, Christine.
We have never been that close to on time. But that's okay. We are getting better at it.
So I think we found out how much time to give the Stump the Chump. If we're within 2 minutes, I'm going to go, this is happy time.
We're doing an hour and a half from here on out. Well, thank you to everybody who has been helping us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this I think was a good turnout. I don't know about all of the how many people were in or out. Fred, do you have a note about the surveys, the questions? I know you like to always mention that at the end of the meetings. I'm not familiar with how these get sent out.
So when you close the meeting, a survey may pop up. Definitely it will go out in email if you'd respond to that so that we can see how we're doing, what we need to improve, where we can make changes so that things run better. We'd appreciate it. Also in there is suggestions for what we can improve on, as well as topics you'd like to see. So that definitely helps guide where things are going in the future.
Yep. And also, if you are going to Insight and are going to be attending the August, please let me know. I'm looking for people to kind of make up the panel so that we can have a good representation. I won't be going this year, but I would still like to get other people that are going to kind of feedback and share with the group how it went down this year, what all happened, and what's the new horizon going to look like for Epicore. Awesome. Anything else then, Christine? Beth?
No, just thanks to everybody. Great session.
Awesome.
I think
this
we're
worked
good.
out well.
Yeah, we'll take all the feedback and we do read every single answer. So anything you guys give us back is good.
Awesome.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks. So I was reading the last two. I'll go ahead and put those into the meeting notes. The last two questions, we'll try and get them answered here.
Okay, we'll write you down one.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Good, everyone. Talk to you in 3 months.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, Christine.
Bye.